All right, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. Today we have a very special guest, Patrick from Lone Wolf Pack. And Patrick teaches us how to be free by really recognizing how the system's been built and really going from the public to the private. So Patrick, how's it going, brother?
It's amazing, Vim. How are you today, man?
It's always amazing to have you on the Blood Money podcast. So I'm going to throw some questions at you, sir. So for people that don't understand the importance of trust law, give us a basic background on how trust law will help people to actually gain the kind of freedom that they think they organically have due to our Constitution.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not a lawyer. I don't practice law or anything else. I study a lot, which gives me the ability to teach you guys the historical things that I know. As far as why trust is important, because everything is already trust. Everything already is a trust, and everything you're doing in everyday activities is a trust. When you have kids, you get up, you feed your kids, that is an automatic trust. It's just something we naturally do. We don't have to put it into writing to say, hey, you're going to make sure that this baby never goes hungry. It's an instinct that we have. So we're constantly performing the trust. The failure and many obstacles we run into, the problems we have, are because we don't have an expressed stipulation of what our beliefs or our information is that we have that conforms to what we believe in that trust. These are like mores or values or ideologies, things like that, things that people believe in as far as being in their private realm and not being a choice of, whether it goes along or conforms with what the mass public does. In this means that you have inherent rights that you can preserve if you know how to stipulate and put these into words, if you can make these into words. And that's what these people who have become very, very wealthy have learned to do, is to create these trusts. They're relationships that don't show any visible relationship to the creator of it, yet there is a benefit that goes somewhere. And again, that's not seen either. These things are not public trusts because, again, everything, well, not everything, but most everything or most people are operating in the public charitable trust. One thing about history is in 1933, we had only one way before 1933. And then there was another trust that was created that allowed people to, by default, they didn't know to preserve the right. So they waived and consented to something else. And people that were normally under the state's jurisdiction or under state protected under the states, the Union states, gave up that jurisdiction to go under a federal jurisdiction or presumed federal jurisdiction. And that's where many people remain right now. Federal rights are no rights at all. You've given up all your private rights to go under basically the laws of the District of Columbia, which is the 10 square miles of DC.
So quick question about that. So if you are, that is the meaning of being in the public trust, is basically having DC have jurisdiction over you.
Yeah. So when you don't express private trust by default, because you didn't express private trust, there has to be accounting that accounting has to go somewhere. And that is accounting that has been assigned to a name that was assigned to you for use. And because we don't record the stuff properly, because we don't make good records and we don't really know to do that, it ends up going a different way. And well, thanks to a very, very small group of bar attorneys who decided to turn things, twist them around, and now under Title 26, everything that we don't know about ends up getting as abandoned property under Title 26. So there's a lot to this that comes later in the knowledge, but a trust is the only way to protect anything. It's the only way to have the ownership out of the state. And you can entrust the stuff in the state, which is the whole idea, is to make them liable for the stuff. so that you don't have to pay anything.
I'm sure a lot of these concepts sound complicated to the viewers, but how could you break it down in its simplest form as far as the baby steps one has to take in order to build their own private trust and therefore take themselves out of the public trust?
Yeah. So, as you know, I mean, you know other people too that struggle with the reality of this being a thing. People are, they're so used to living a certain way. It's hard to believe that there's another way that this all operates, because none of it makes sense. And those options have never been there for many people. There is no money per se. There's only accounting. So the presumption is that we are not fit for doing our own accountability. We're not accountable, I guess. We're not. We're considered wards of the state under definition, by definition, because we haven't ever taken authority or control of anything that was gifted or intended for us. And then when we do use it, we're using it like an abuse. We're abusing it like kids that just are wasteful.
So, sorry, quick question. When you say stuff like ward of the state, I've heard that when you are a ward of the state, they almost look at you like you're handicapped or something, that you are so deficient that they need to run your affairs.
Yeah, I mean, don't you get treated like that at the driver's license?
Mm-hmm. Like DMV?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. Yeah, motor vehicle, DMV, yeah, all those. They treat you like that because that's what it is. I mean, it really is. You have no idea. When you walk out of there with a title, that's pretty clear you don't know what you're doing, because you should never walk out of there with the title. It's not your title. It says it's theirs. So why are you taking it home with you?
So the way of them putting a title upon you is a way of them infringing upon your rights. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, a registration is a surrender of property. Anytime you register something, you're giving up ownership of it. You just gave your rights down to somebody else and you took a diminished position in anything you register. Registration is for enemies of the state. They have to register their property so that they know where the enemies of the state are and what they're doing.
So are you saying that by going through the public trust, most often you're looked at as an enemy of the state?
There's no other way to do it. You're either in the public charitable trust or you're private. That's it. That's the only two ways. So if you don't know about it, then you by default fall into that category of being classified as an enemy. And that was done in by Executive Order 1933. That was the second doing by FDR, and that created under Title 50 the Trading with the Enemy Act, so that it wasn't just because before it used to be where people born in the state were separate from federal citizenship, but then when he signed that, put the pen to the paper, that was the day of consecration. When he said a day of consecration is a donation of something to a higher source is what it is. So you look up that word, it says consecration. So we're going to give this to a higher source. So we're automatically acquiescing and saying, well, you're mightier than I am. That's what we're doing. And everybody got put in that position saying, oh, you're mightier than I am. So now we're all lower than we're subordinate to. We stand under that particular statement. And we all become liable because we never opted out and we didn't know to. But that's why, when they say day of consecration is a papal term. It's a papal term. It's a Vatican term. And there's a reason why, because they were literally taking all of the titles to all of the people and they were putting them into a public trust, and people didn't even know about it. They had no idea. Overnight, boom, just like that. There was all these people that changed their status. Didn't even know it.
Wow. So now to get out of that public trust, that is obviously and infringing on people's rights and freedoms. Tell us, and for the viewers out there, it's very important that people register to Patrick's classes, because this is more of a kind of like your bullet points, your basic bullet points. But there's so much more to this. But we're going to go over some of the broad strokes here. Now, the first step that one needs to take is changing their name. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yeah. Come out of her, my people. So you guys are literally borrowing an estate. That name was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent thing. It was a temporary name because they have to have something or some title on there to be able to give accounting to that. And Mom created it for your intent, but she didn't know to specify exactly what it was for. She didn't have a trust in her hands. So she didn't know. So they couldn't say, oh, well, this is what the baby goes by. So they said, oh, well, the baby goes by our stuff because it doesn't go by his own private stuff. And that's just the way these all happen exactly the same way. Just by default, it falls in, and then you just fall into place, and it continues that way.
Wow. So first you change your name, and you're changing your name really from this fake corporate name. I've heard things like this is a dead company name, so to speak, which could be, for example, my name is Vem Miller, but Vem Miller in uppercase is some dead corporate name. So I would basically then go and register my name, wrong word. I would change my name to Vem Miller in lowercase. Is that the way it happens?
No. So here's what you're doing. They're literally going over to another leasing company. Everything you're doing under that name that they created in all caps is their name. So everything you've created, like you bought stuff with it, you went and leased stuff with it, you've used stuff with it, you've told people you were that. Never was you. You're not a name. We're spiritual beings, but we just happen to be stuck in this awkward physical world. And in this awkward physical world, yeah, you know what? These weirdos that are down here require people to be called something, because we can't just walk, it wouldn't make sense, right? I mean, them sounds a lot better than, you know what I'm saying? Like we could expand on that, but it's not necessary. You're given a name that is like what mom put on the paper, but it's not that name, because they can't use your Christian name and put it on into commerce. They can't just move like something that God gave you and move it straight into business. That's not like honorable. That's dishonorable. But what they can do is they can create something that says it's a benefit for you. And it really is a benefit for you. I mean, thinking of it, if you just really think about it, if something happens to you, you're going to get hospital care. You're going to get taken care of. Now, whether we consider that good or not, I mean, that's subjective. And that's kind of our own fault, because what we've done is we've let the people that are in control of that stuff have the control over it, to where now they're just our bosses. They control us, and that's not the way it should be either. We are in a public charitable trust, and in public charitable trust, it says that you're not okay to be making your own decisions. You need someone else to do that. And we reaffirm that decision with the application for Social Security, because we even go in deeper and we say, well, we have this estate, we can't control it, but now I need more help, so go get the money for me and help me out with money. And they go in that, and they're like, okay, now since you need help with money, you clearly cannot handle it on your own, so we're going to lock you out of it. And that's a Social Security. So this trust, this public trust, is written under the pretenses that it's really helping public, but when the public doesn't know about it, and a certain amount of people lose control of the use of what the money's for, then it becomes just a donation for something, and then no instructions with what it goes for, and that's where it becomes corrupt. So we have the control over all this stuff. When we start using it wrong, and then they got to come after us with like charge us with like a ticket, or charge us with a crime, that's just the company's attempt to go and collect money. It's a charge that you already agreed to by accepting the benefits of driver's license, Social Security card, all that stuff. All those are public benefits. And I did a YouTube the other day specifically on the public charitable trust on YouTube.
Wow. So it's almost like if you're taking what seems like they're free stuff, if you're taking their benefits, you're essentially acquiescing into this public charitable trust system that seems to deal with their members almost like their children incapable of making their own decisions.
Yeah. So corpus juris secundum, if you look up American jurisprudence second under guardian ward, you'll see guardian ward relationship. And it specifies that when we are like all of this stuff that you bring, when people bring these accounts or these lawsuits into court, those are a ward going to his guardian to complain. That's all it is. It's a complaint. And by going and applying at that or registering or signing up for the original lawsuit, you're submitting to go under that particular jurisdiction under guardian ward relationship. And many times they require you to get a attorney, which says that you're incompetent of handling your own affairs. And that's really why they can't send you to prison without an attorney. You cannot go to prison unless you have an attorney appointed for you, because they have to be able to sign off and say that they agree to go to prison because they're doing it under power of attorney.
Wow. All right. So as we discussed, first thing is the name change, changing it back to your Christian name. Is there any more details you'd like to give about that topic?
Well, it's it's critical that you know what the details are. I mean, the law only recognizes a first and a last. It doesn't recognize any middle. And I come from a Mexican family where you have like 15 names. Nah, you got to get rid of those, because that was something that was created, and it was confusing, and and then it became a side thing that people did, and it actually it provided that, well, more confusion in the jurisdictional question, because if a state owns a name that's in all caps and you have 5 of them, then you're under the 5 different jurisdictions of that name. But if you have your own Christian appellation, and it's pretty clear, it's not your name anyways. People need to understand that. This is not your name. We go by a sound, instead of going, we go by a sound. That's all it is. And you're just creating another vehicle that's not made by the corporation. The corporation made that name. So if you don't want to have a name that belongs to a corporation, some people do. This is another thing too. We don't talk about this very often, but we always presume that everybody wants to remove themselves from this situation. And some people get into this and they start it, and then they say, oh, no, I don't want to do any of that. And so they're better off as wards. I mean, quite honestly, I'm not disrespecting anyone. It's just some people are not equipped to handle their own affairs. And they need that, which is why this was a thing in the first place. It just happened to fall into a very comfortable situation where they offer all kinds of benefits that are really hard to say no. Like, hey, do you want to take a month off of work and we'll pay you $1,500 for the month? Or you can just say no. I mean, that's kind of tempting, but when you learn what's behind it, like you're just creating more debt, and all that credit is yours anyways. So they're asking you to basically give them permission to create a contract for you whereby you'll hold more liability than you really have. And because we don't know how to do it any other way, we agree to it. That's really what everything comes down to. All the benefits and things they call benefits and privileges. These things were supposed to be roads and bridges, stuff that benefited the public, like orphans, widows, homeless shelters, things like that were really benefiting public people. But when they see all that money come in and they think, well, we only have this much in demands, we have all this money and only this much in demands, well, we have a surplus. And so what do they do with that? You guys can look up the CAFRs, Certified Annual Financial Reports. Every municipality has it, and there's billions of dollars in these CAFRs. They say all of these municipalities are going around saying how broke they are, how broke. We're so broke. We need this money. We need to raise taxes. And there's billions in these CAFRs. but it's abandoned property and people don't even bother to look, so they don't know it's there. And then they don't tell the people what to use it for. So it just sits there and people get rich and we wonder why we're being controlled.
Wow. Wow, that's some interesting information, man. So essentially, it seems as though these benefits, these things that we think are, free, are actually, they bear a very heavy cost and burden upon us.
Yeah, well, there's many ways that I've tried to describe this, but I would say that it is appealing because there's no effort that is required. You're not required any effort. And that's very tempting to a lot of people. Like, I don't have to do anything and I can get this. And that is a misperception because there's always a cost that comes with this stuff. And many times, quite often, the cost is not even remotely worth what the exchange of the benefit is. I want to give a great example, and that is bring it back to those of you who have been convicted of maybe a crime, something small, and you're required to, or maybe even a divorce situation. That's quite frequent too, where you get into a divorce situation and then they want you to go and make a like reconciliation services or mediation services, or like you have to become reacclimated to your own progeny. That's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, you were never really acclimated to them other than they're your blood in the first place, but then they have this service. This service is created from the creation of a problem. David Icke does a very good exemplification of this, but he talks about problem, create a problem, create a solution, and then you become necessary. So out there is emergency powers that we're under right now. So create an emergency, right? Create an emergency like a fire, forest fire, or create a gunman goes and shoots something up, or maybe a bomber somewhere. All of these different things are emergencies. They're just pop-up emergencies. Many of them have been dispelled as far as like the government has been busted. And, I'm not here for any controversy, but there's a lot of information. There's a gentleman out there that was a law enforcement officer for many years, and he did a whole entire research project on Sandy Hook and dispelled every one of it. And it was a emergency. It was a community emergency that they all participated in the benefit of the community, because what they did it under war powers, emergency war powers. So part of the survival of this whole organization or group is hedge money. You have to be the top. You have to survive. So whatever it takes to survive, you do whatever those precautionary measures are. And that includes, like right now, they're a bankrupt company. So anybody that has lawful money is 180 degrees ahead of these people, way on a better position, because they're broke. They have no money. And there's only discharge of debt. And because of that, there's a lot of people that are getting rich off of unsuspecting people that don't know how the monetary system works. And these are people, like, this wouldn't be a big deal, but it's got to be corrected a little bit, because here's the deal, is that the people that I wasn't even born at the time that this stuff was going on. So for me to even know about this is super rare. And it had to, like, what happened was, well, I was arrested and I was locked up in a cage. And that's how I learned about all this, because I knew that there wasn't going to be like any justice about this. I know how this stuff works. You never get any remedy until after you're done paying the price. So after you go and pay the price, then you can go back and ask somebody to give you remedy. Well, that is not a way to live, folks. We should never be living by anybody else's way of telling us that we have to go about doing things, especially when they took the money. Okay. If somebody took the money away and says, okay, look, we're going to manage your money. So while we manage your money, then you need to go keep busy. Okay, well, if I'm going to keep busy, then I'm going to keep busy with what I want, because when you take the money, that means there's only accounting. And, well, anybody can create accounting. I can't go make money, but I can go create accounting. And that's what we learn. We learn that there's only accounting, and there's those that do the accounting, and there are those that don't do accounting. And if you're not doing accounting, then you have a whole private ledger that's not getting any billing, and you're not getting any credit for the stuff that you're doing, because you're just letting your labor go to waste. Your labor is your time. And if you're not turning it into the trust, then you're not going to get paid for it. And so instead of creating a trust and doing that ourselves, we go out and seek a contract, because that's what everybody tells us. Go get in a contract. Go get in a contract with a company, because then that's your career. Well, they don't tell us that you have a choice between a career and a vocation. They don't tell you that you can have a vocation and you can have pretty much unlimited whatever you want. I mean, the amount that they have set is beyond what anybody can, like. I mean, you would really have to be living up like high on the hog to spend everything that the accounting allows. But you have to know that these things were intended for your use and how they got there. And you have to know the intricacies, like, did mom sign something? Is mom's liability on there? Is mom alive? Some of this stuff can be corrected. I mean, all of it can be corrected with or without mom. Just like, I was telling somebody else the other day, they had a criminal record. Well, that's not your record. It's not your record. You can't be a criminal. It's impossible. You cannot be a criminal because you are not a member of that group, except you didn't know that you weren't. So, and I'm not saying that there aren't people that aren't criminals, okay? Anyone that goes out and harms someone's life, liberty, or property. If you harm someone's life, if you kill somebody, or you take their life, then you deserve to be punished. If you kidnap somebody and you keep them from doing their freedom, being free, then you deserve to be punished. If you steal somebody's property, then you deserve to be punished. Other than that, those are the only crimes that a state can take jurisdiction over if you know who you are. Otherwise, you fall into the state's jurisdiction by participating and by making a plea and by, getting involved in whatever they're trying to do. So trusts are important in every facet of what we're doing, and ensuring that, what's in that trust and knowing about it is ensuring our private rights remain and we're not waiving anything.
Wow. Okay. So after the name change is done, what are the steps that you recommend in order for people to get out of the public trust and to build their own trust?
Well, the most important part is clean hands. You have to come in clean hands. Clean hands means giving the proper notices to the proper parties that you have been doing business with. Who did you create accounting with? It's just like someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, can I borrow your car?" And you loan your car, and you come back and you're like, "Hey, they didn't put any gas in it. There's no, they didn't tell you how many miles they used it for. They didn't tell you where they went." It's just like not accountable at all. And as long as we're accountable, then we get credit for what we do, but we're not taught to be accountable. So we skip over it. And then we say, well, we didn't know we had to do that. Well, that's the only way that you can be accountable. And the only way you can know that is just by start being accountable, because no one's ever going to tell you and say, hey, like, I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to say, hey, there's a way you can be accountable. There's a way that you can go and do this, that you have more authority to do stuff. And there's a way that you can live without having to go and do the things that everyone tells you have to do. You have to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. You have to figure out the way that it was created for you, that was covered up and hidden, and go get that way back, because that's the way it used to be in the first place. That's the way it existed before all of this fiat monopoly money came along.
Wow. And for people that don't understand what fiat monopoly money means, could you break that down so we understand the significance of it?
Yeah. So in the time where there was only lawful coin, where the states were creating or the money was being produced in lawful coin, gold and silver, people would walk up to a window with a weight of gold. They would weigh that gold and they would give them a certificate in exchange for that gold in the amount that that gold weighed or that silver weighed. That is a receipt for a deposit that is going into that treasury. Okay. So with that receipt, because when they took away the money, they didn't take away the receipts. All those receipts are still sitting out there. In fact, you can go on eBay and you can still buy all those receipts that are still connected to lawful money. That was actually somebody walking up to a window, turning something in and getting something in return in exchange for it. The receipt, okay? The receipt is the proof and the evidence that this thing exists. The money never went away, so we can still discharge with silver. It still exists, and that's exactly how trusts work. You put something of lawful value inside of a trust, and then you can use that to handle in trust the accounting so that things can be zeroed out, because all there is accounting. There's no money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So, all right. So tell us some scenarios here where once you're out of the public trust, how does one's life change and improve?
Whoa. Okay. So, well, no one, I don't ever get bothered. I don't ever I don't know. I can't tell you. Hard to say. I don't ever get pulled over. I don't get pulled over. I don't. If I did get pulled over like a couple of years ago in another state, and I literally was in the process of working like details out, figuring some of this stuff out, and the final parts of it. I called up the clerk and I gave her all of the information and what I knew, and it just, my knowledge, literally like regurgitating. Here's what I know, what happened. Here's what I did. Here's what I'm aware of. I want to remain in honor. I want to have clean hands. I want to come in good faith. I don't want to, do anything that is dishonorable or disrespectful to anybody. I want to just be left alone, and I want to take care of my business. And so I let her know that, and then I went to follow up with it about 2 weeks later, and the other clerk that I called had no idea that it even existed. She says, "No, we don't even have you in the system." And that's what happens. That's literally what happens when you call them and you explain what your position is, that you are not, what they presumed you to be. And there were other things too. There was, when I originally left, I signed the ticket a certain way. And I did that so I could express trust, so that later on that was preserved and I could go and assert that to her later on. So it's knowing like certain things, to do these things. And once you do them, you set it up for yourself to open up other doors. And there's other options that you have. You just didn't know about them. There's a lot of other options that you guys have.
Wow. Now, we've heard this. Essentially, we've heard that by doing your own accounting through private trust, that all of a sudden issues of money disappear. You find out there is no money. You find out how things work. Could you give us a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah. So a trust is when you put something in someone else's hands to handle for someone else's benefit. You guys are out there signing things, and that's granting the credit. So you're grantors of all that stuff, but you're not giving any sort of idea of what you want to do. You don't even know what you're doing, honestly. You don't even know what's being issued. You just know if you sign there that something happens after that, or that's what they tell you need to do. So when you start learning what that does, you can start controlling what that is. And when you say, hey, I want to have this delegated for this purpose, well, it's pretty clear what your intent was before you did it. The only way that you are ever taken advantage of is when someone has the wrong presumption and you fail to speak up and clarify that presumption. And many people, there's a lot of elderly people that are taking advantage of that because they don't know how to speak up. They're not taught to speak up. We're taught to go and we're taught in every way to be victims. We're taught to be victims, Vim. That's just all it is. I mean, 99.9% of these people, if they would just stop being victims, all their problems would go away. Seriously. Because you can't ever, and this system knows this. This system knows that as long as you're a victim, there's no fixing anything. because you're too busy being a victim. You got to go tell people your story. You got to go share. You got to go get other allies to side with you. You got to go put all this energy into something that they know is not going to be any fruitful, because it's ultimately their decision. And everything that is happening that's bad to people is happening in law, because we're under emergency powers. So, well, when the law is suspended, the only remedy you're going to have is inequity. That's why I teach what I teach, because I went to prison for something that I didn't do. And if I would have known that this existed, I could have solved it before I sat in that place for as long as I did. I don't regret sitting in there. I mean, every single thing that I've learned has been, like I'm telling you, some of the books that I read that put me in touch here have nothing to do with equity jurisprudence or this lone wolf pack or anything at all. But it literally made me wake up and realize a lot of this stuff that was happening. And there's no other way. I don't think I would have, I went from being in the custody of a military officer in my family. My father was a retired military officer. And so I never had any control of my life there. And then I went straight from that to incarceration. So seeing that and then going out and seeing the world right after that, like, whoa, hey, you have choices? Like I saw something 180 degrees. It's like I didn't even see the same world anymore. And so I think I recognize that because a little bit more than most people. And that's why I can see these things with what I call equity eyes.
So people in America expect to have constitutional rights, but you are saying that America for a very long time has been under emergency powers, which essentially void one's constitutional rights. Can you talk a little bit about that topic?
Yeah, so let's talk about the root. Let's talk about the root first. So a constitutor is one who passes a debt to another. So do you have a right to have a debt passed on to you? Yes, you all have the right to have the debt passed on to you. Do you have a choice on whether you want the debt to be passed on to you? Absolutely. You have a choice on whether you want that to be used to be passed on to you. Do you have a choice on whether you want to participate and use your credit to pay for things to the United States and create another contract to pay them again to help them reduce their bankruptcy? Yes. So we all do have constitutional rights. If you want to go into that bankruptcy, then you have to go under those constitutional rights. However, right now, and those are diminished rights from your God-given rights. Like God didn't say you have to go put your gun outside of your holster, right? He doesn't say that. God doesn't tell you that. God doesn't say you have to be in by 10 p.m. God doesn't care. It's only a corporation that cares. So what I'm saying is that we've diminished those rights to go under a constitution, which is a debt. So the constitutors were people who passed the debt on to us, and we accepted that debt if we want to. It's a choice. Okay, there's a equitable principle called subrogation that allows you to you pass that debt on and become secondarily liable to the original debtor. And that's what we're doing. We're giving you guys, showing you how to do that. And to make the record, it's all about coming in clean hands, and there's steps that you have to do. But the trust that we're in is the Constitution. That is the in God we trust. There's no real rights per se in there. There's not the rights that you're thinking of. You can't go do what you want to do. You have to do what's in the Constitution, which is a corporation. And that's because you joined by registering that certificate of yours with the company and saying, handle my estate for me, because you didn't put it into your own estate. And so now that's exactly what they do. When they pull you over on the side of the road, they see, give me your ID. When you hand them their ID, then you're saying, I'm not a part of my trust. I'm a part of a public trust. You give them the public trust ID, and now they give you the public trust debt. They pass the debt on to you. They're constitutors. That's what they do. They pass the debt on to you. So that's where you have a constitutional right. You have a constitutional right to pay that debt that you agreed to pay. And so those constitutional rights are not what you think they are. Your rights are actually before the Constitution begins, and that's in the conveyance of the land. But we don't even know that either, because nobody owns any of their houses or their property. They're listed as a tenant on their mortgages. So that's a whole different different ball game. But as far as what we're under right now is executive orders. Okay, so anybody that doesn't know their if they don't have a private trust or you can't speak on your suretyship relationship, then you're in the public charitable trust, and that is just exactly what's happening. That's where they say you have constitutional rights, but it's actually proclamation order right now. It's executive order that says that we're under emergency powers, and it's a trading with the Enemy Act under Title 50. So we're all classified as enemies.
A citizen is an enemy of the state, you're saying?
There's two types of citizens. There's a capital C and a lowercase c. So that's why I just say civilian. Civilian is, you're going to avoid all that. Like, don't get involved in that controversy. That's another just way of, there's different ways that there's alphabet soup that comes up with confusing ways of doing this just to confuse people. So just say private civilian, you'll be good.
You were talking about that you don't get pulled over, right? But it sounds like if you get pulled over, you have a specific way of dealing with the police. You're saying that if you give your license, you're basically acquiescing to the public trust. So take us through that, okay? Why don't you get pulled over? And if you did get pulled over, how would you deal with the police officer that's different than how we're traditionally used to dealing with the police officer?
Yeah. So, okay. So, well, I'd say the first reason I don't get pulled over is because I don't do anything that's going to get me pulled over. Like, don't create any attention. Just like I mind my own business. I just take. If in this particular case we be pulled over, I was going 60 and a 35 over a bridge in Florida. I was going over like one of the causeways there. And I wasn't paying attention. I was going down the hill, and I just, I just spaced it. So this gentleman pulls me over, and one of the things that people need to make sure that you're doing is you give notice first. Okay, you give notice of what your position is. If you're giving them an ID, you need to make sure that you're giving them an ID under what position. Like, are you that ID? Is that who you are? Or is that the only ID that you have so that you can maintain compliance? It's knowing that stuff. But I always say, and this is just a good rule to have, is before I answer any questions, I want to make sure that I'm being treated under private civilian due process. And as long as you're being treated under private civilian due process, everything else is military jurisdiction. So they're doing this under military. As long as you opt out of military, then the only other one is civilian due process. So when they know that, well, they can't take you under that due process because you've already stated before you even had a contract or any correspondence with them, you already stated. So what we teach you to do is go make the record now so that before you get that conversation on the side of the road, you have the record there. That record is stronger than me giving notice right on the side of the road. Because if I don't have that recorded and that other guy doesn't want to give up that recording, then it's my word against his. But if you create these records, then they're irrefutable. You can't argue a record that is on the public record.
So I've heard that when the police pulls you over, you're not even supposed to give your ID. You're supposed to say that, am I being accused of a crime here? What's your name and badge number? Is any of that true?
I don't get into any of those things. I don't there's no need to. There's no need to. Like, when you start challenging somebody, then there's a lot of those, Vem, a lot of those police officers out there they're traumatized people. They're still people that are traumatized. And that's why they get into some of them, not all of them. Some of them are really, really good people. Some of them are traumatized people. And when you put a gun in their hand, we've seen what happens, and they end up shooting good people because they're just over aggressive on certain things, and it just happens. So I don't even go into that realm where there's any sort of question. I respect these guys. I have my record. I just create my record for myself, and whatever these guys do and whatever they say, let them do it. Let them say it. And my notice to them is all I need to do. All I have to do is worry about what I'm doing for myself to identify to them who I am. And once I convey that, whatever they do with it is not my problem. I'm the enforcer after that point.
Let's clarify here. In terms of keeping a record, are you specifically talking about recording the interaction?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, keep a video recorder in your vehicle, or, turn your camera on, or, have another witness with you. Whatever you've got available, you use that.
Let's talk a little bit about children. One of the big things we hear is that, organizations like CPS just come and take people's children. And, we have these crazy family law courts that are constantly doing things like separating families, alienating dads, alienating moms. How does this play into this process of trust law, play into avoiding that kind of nonsense?
Well, think about what you registered first. Remember registration? We're surrendering ownership to it, right? Remember that? So we think back on that. We did sign an application for live birth, didn't we? So we registered our kids. So we just gave over ownership, and we can't complain that someone's taking our property when we just gave the ownership to them. So if you didn't give ownership, then you need to speak up and make a record of that. That's not what happened. Then you need to fix that. Most of this stuff, folks, is really simple. That's why a lot of people don't get it, because it can't be that easy. It's really that easy. It's really just creating the record of the truth. And who's going to tell you that piece of paper doesn't exist once you do it? Or if you go to somebody and say, hey, I want you to object to this if you don't agree. Object to this if you don't agree says if you don't object, you agree. So you're a creator, man. We got to just use our creative minds and go out there and create these things, because they're not going to create it themselves. Now, you will have the other side of it where the bad records, they'll create themselves, because there's always people behind them doing them, right? The prosecutor, all these people want to hang everybody. They want to just like make their records mud. Because the more mud your record is, the less the more it indicates that you have no control over. You can't control your own affairs. The more chaotic that the record looks like, the more it looks like you're incompetent. And that's all they're doing. They're just building a record of incompetency over time. And anytime you want to be competent, you're welcome to. You just got to stand up and start doing it.
Take us through some more of the steps. I mean, you've described the name change process. You've talked a little bit about, arriving to the courts and essentially demanding your Christian name. Take us through some more of the steps that are relevant here and what people could expect from taking those steps.
Well, many of the notices, again, people haven't been accountable. And I don't, I say that these are trigger words, guys. You guys got to understand that when I'm saying you're not accountable, that's supposed to trigger you by the corporation, because accountable to you means that you're not worthy. But it just means that you haven't been taking numbers down. It doesn't mean you're not worthy. It means that you haven't written numbers down because someone didn't tell you to write numbers down. When, for example, people own homes, or they believe that they own homes, okay? There is a dual relationship of ownership that goes on. When you have a mortgage on a home and you are also listed as a tenant on the deed, you have a dual role, okay? You have where you sign something and you've become a tenant, except your intended was the beneficiary. You wanted yourself to be the beneficiary, like you're buying this land for you, except it got turned around. Then on the other half of that, you're continuing to play along with something that is completely false, because you don't even know it's false. See, equity allows a man or a woman, once they discover something is not right, to go and fix that. And giving notice to the proper parties is a requirement of that. So beyond that, controlling things, right now you're holding the title to stuff that is owned by another company. You're holding another company's title, which means that you have the liability. It's like being the insurance policy carrier because you didn't know to give them the paper back. And that's what's happening. You guys are holding liability for a company because you're holding a piece of paper because you don't know how to give it back to them in trust. And we don't know how to create trust. We were never taught to create it. We were just taught to like be wasteful and never do anything else. And then whenever we have problems, complain. And all those things, every single word, complaint, anything that is like statutory word is a benefit word. When you complain, it's a benefit. Now you're going as a ward to go get some of your benefits that, well, you're going to go see if you're worthy of receiving your own benefits.
Like
there's a whole realm. There's a whole realm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, like a child, basically, like a child. Somebody else that was I was speaking with was almost like the legal definition, and this is literal, by the way, is that they look at you like you are retarded.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and I have I mean, you can look up guardian and ward, but it's incompetency. It's there's and I mentioned this, I think, when we talked last, but you guys, if you go read that book, Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran,
Mm-hmm.
there's I'm going to be doing some other things on my particular podcast on YouTube because there's some history that people have no idea about that is crazy backwards. Like in America, they literally had only up to the edge of the Mississippi River settled, and they would offer land outside of that so that they would see if the people would live, and if they survived, they would be on the edge of the Indians where the Indians were, so then they could go inhabit the area up to the edge of those people, and then they'd offer more people to go further and further out, and that's how they kept populating the West. That's literally how the West got populated, because the United States didn't want to go out there and do it themselves because they were getting wiped out by the Indians. So they would send people out there and then populate up to the edge of the people because the people would get along with the Indians, and then they would just take more and more and more. And, they owned all the land, and then they ended up with these small little pockets, and that's all they have left.
They use the people to acquire land from the Indians.
Yeah. They would offer the free land, and then they would turn around and sell it.
Wow.
They'd offer it free because you could still see there's advertisements out there that like the old like they would make cinemas or whatever. Like you go to the movie theater, they had the land for sale. They still have those cinema trailers that you can watch.
Wow. Let's talk about usury. I mean, we've heard on this podcast that usury is the great evil that is essentially causing a misery index for Americans because the interest rates on homes are so high. And I've heard that's called usury. And that is what's really suppressing the American people. But I've also heard that when you go into trust law, you are out of that usury system. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, usury is a choice. So let's just look at the root of the word, usury. Like if you want to be used, then there's a price you got to pay. You're going to get used. Somebody's using your money, and that's really all it is you're having to pay a fee on something that is already yours. You have those that are able to figure out who you are have credit that is unlimited for your purposes for that you want to use it for. And those that don't know any better are going to go to places that will charge them or say that this is the system and this is how money works. And if they believe that, then they have to pay that fee that's called a usury fee. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's just it's a contractual agreement that says that you don't have the ability to go get your own money, so you're going to use someone else's money. And all it is them going and accessing your account for you and turning around and charging you on a contract to pay it back.
Wow. And this being in trust law takes you out of that system. How does it practically take you out of that system?
Well, because you have an accounting, it's like let's just imagine this. You have a piggy bank, okay? You have a piggy bank at home, and that piggy bank is all yours. Like, you're using it, you spend stuff that you need, and then someone comes along and says, "No, no, 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 no. You don't know how to use that piggy bank. You're not using that piggy bank right. It's wrong." In fact, you know what? You've been taking that piggy bank and using stuff out of it and going getting drunk all the time. And because of that, you're not even accountable. You're not worthy. They declared, that's what they did with all of the Indian people. They declared them as alcoholics. Some of them were, but some of them were driven that way too, because, all of this stuff is just chaotic. It's just, you tell people that there's something that they're not, and you can clearly see that you're not that, but you're forced to be that. It doesn't ride well with nature. And people, that's why people, can't, they commit suicide. They just can't handle the differences. There's a friction between, what's resonating on a frequency and what they see and is happening. And like, people can't handle that difference when they don't understand that. And that's why, all of this stuff, Vem, is when it comes down to it, it's really, really sad, because you see all of these events. Okay. You got all of this, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any way, but you can go and look up on any state and go look up Colorado cloud seeding. Okay, they have a cloud seeding project that they're doing right now that is giving New Mexico and Arizona. Supposedly, what they're doing is they're blasting the clouds or the weather in the Rockies so that it rains a lot, and then all that will roll down the hill to California and Arizona and New Mexico. That's the plan. That is literally their plan for this global warming stuff. Okay, so they create these situations. Well, there's so much more connected to it. Right now, when you go and create cloud seeding, what you're doing is you're creating these huge thunderstorms that create these like 90-mile-an-hour winds that now cause storms that cause roofs to come off of houses. Now you're creating insurance policy issues. Well, these people have insurance policies because they're wards of the state. Then you get them to go cash out on that. There's no money. There's no money. You're creating the roof being blown off their house, and then you're making them go access their credit through you because they don't know how to do it. And that's the whole, that's what, when this comes down to okay, that's not right. That needs to be leveled out, because that kind of stuff isn't okay for people to do. And there's people that need help that are not getting it. But the idea is to share the knowledge with people, let you become, more aware of that. And then you can start whittling away or just closing off those doors that are allowing access to these things. It's not about, creating hate and saying, somebody screwed me over. That is, again, we're going into victim. We can't be in that victim mentality, because we're not going to fix anything if we're remaining in that. We got to get onto okay, we're fixers. We're going to fix this. What are we going to create? We're going to create a record that is going to be adequate to substantiate whatever we're trying to make. And everybody's situation is different. Everybody has different obstacles. It's just learning the method of how to do this, how to create a more superior record than what any private company does. Or I say private company, I'm specifically talking about what people call court.
I've heard there's foreign grantor trusts. There's different kind of trusts. Tell us which is the most powerful kind of trust and how you attain that kind of trust in order to stop the government from infringing upon your trust.
Oh, well, so I'll tell you that irrevocable trust can be revoked. And under the C-Prey doctrine, they can go in and amend a trust. They can set aside a trust. They can do those things as long as the jurisdiction is there. The grantor is never a U.S. citizen. It can't be. And if you're born in one of the states, then you're not a U.S. citizen. The only way you can be a U.S. citizen is by agreeing to be a U.S. citizen, accepting U.S. citizen benefits, or being born in the District of Columbia. It's the only three ways you can be a U.S. citizen. Everybody else is volunteering, and they don't fit in that category. They're just volunteering for that position because they don't know that another position exists. And once we go and create these records and we make our position known, then it's much better. I'm not going to say there's like one trust is better than another. I'll tell you, an irrevocable trust is where you take your property and you move it into the trust, and now the trust owns it. So like the state doesn't own it, you don't own it, nobody owns it. It's the trust. The trust owns it. And the grantor is the one that created the trust, and they're just located outside of the jurisdiction of the United States. So a grantor that's foreign to the United States can be born in Colorado State or in Nevada State, but not in the state of Nevada, because that's a different jurisdiction.